Good evening. My name is Tim Neff, and I'm the Vice President and Director of Museum and Education at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our regular Spotlight On program on the second Thursday evening of each month. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I know we have a great program lined up. I'll be joined here in a minute with our curator, Michael Kraus, who usually joins me on the program. But also joining tonight, we're glad to have Lisa Turano, who's our collections manager. And they're going to give us a sneak peek at kind of what goes on in the curatorial department. And we're going to look at actually specifically last year, 2022, and what happened in the department, some of the new acquisitions that we made and that were donated to us. So we've got a lot of exciting things to share with you. Before we get started, though, I just want to talk a little bit about Soldiers and Sailors, of course. I always want to mention a little bit about us here. Soldiers and Sailors is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the Oakland neighborhood. It is a memorial that was built to honor Civil War veterans, but today stands as a memorial and a museum that honors all of those who have served Civil War through present day. It's a beautiful building, lots of great artifacts inside, all donated by veterans, mostly local veterans through the years. And we use these objects to tell their story and honor their service to our country. So if you haven't been here, we welcome you to come and visit us. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Or if you haven't been here in a while, we always like to see repeat visitors come back, and you can always see some of the things that have changed, including one little artifact we'll be talking about tonight is newer in one of the exhibits. So there's always new things popping up, and we encourage you to come visit us here at Soldiers and Sailors. As always, as long as we have time, we'll take questions at the end of the program. If we're watching on Facebook, all you have to do is submit a comment, and we'll get your question that way. If you're watching on YouTube, you have to email us at soldiersandsailorspittsburgh@gmail.com. And even if you think of a question later on, never hesitate to email any of us. That's what we're here for. That's our job, and we love sharing information. So if any other time you want to talk to any of us, you can go to our website, soldiersandsailorshall.org, under the Contact Us page, and you'll find an easy way to email all of us. That'll be on the program this evening. And with that said, as I mentioned earlier, we are being joined tonight by Lisa Turano, our collections manager, and Michael Kraus, our curator of collections. Here's a couple photos of them in action. But I'm just going to turn it over to them. I'll start with Lisa here, just to give you a little brief overview of some of the things she does here, and a little bit about her background. So Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Lisa Turano. I am the collection manager here at Soldiers and Sailors. I have the honor and privilege to be the caretaker over the 11,000 artifacts that are in this building. I have the help with interns, and they help me catalog everything when it comes in, and they get it processed into our system. Along with that, I help the team here with Tim and Mike with displays and tours, and I do a little grant writing. So it's all hands on deck here with our team. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's one thing we find about working at our museum with such a small staff. There's no doubt about it. We wear many hats. We all do a little bit of everything. But we have our specific roles, but there's always other things to help out with around the entire museum here. So Michael, you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for reminding me to do that.
I thought I'd sneak it in. I was trying to be sly about it, but
make my lips move with no sound. My name is Michael Kraus. I'm the curator here at Soldiers and Sailors. For me, this is a dream job. I am a military historian. I also am an artist, so I can combine those two talents in understanding our collection, what we have, what we've had for some of the pieces over 100 years, up to even the newest things that come in, which is what we'll be talking about. And it's kind of my job to interpret those and kind of put them in a perspective of how we're going to use them and what we're going to do with them and what they say about history.
Sure. And I think maybe this is a good opportunity also to point out, I'm broadcasting from where our usual spot is in what we call our Hall of Valor. These are actual medals of honor on the wall behind me. These are just a few of the 7 real medals of honor that we have in our collection and on display. Lisa is in one of our storage areas, what we call the morgue. which is kind of a weird name, but there's no bodies buried there or anything like that. But
I'm
it is
hanging in
one
the
of our,
warts. Yes.
but it is, you can see the boxes lined up behind her, the archive boxes behind her on the shelves. And I can tell you, since Lisa's been here, a lot of that storage space has become much more navigable and easier to access. And it's really come a long way. So that's where she is. And Michael is in the curator's office, which you can just see all around. You got a little photography studio back there where we photograph artifacts, some cool things on the wall. So people are really excited when they get to kind of see these little peeks behind. And I maybe take this opportunity to throw out a cheap plug. We have a very special tour called the Behind the Scenes Tour, where you can come and spend the day, basically almost a day with us, and get to see all these locations that aren't readily available to the public, and get to see some of the artifacts that aren't on display. It is, how much is it? 125 a person? Am I hitting that right? Does you guys?
I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's $125 a person. So it really is a way for us to raise some funds. But I think it's a very worthwhile trip because you get to see things nobody else gets to see. You get a little lunch out of it, and you just get to spend the day with us. So anybody interested in that, as I always say, you can always visit our website under the tours section. It is listed there. So if anything, you're seeing anything like, oh, I'd love to see that, you can actually have the opportunity to see these things in person on our behind the scenes tour. Okay, enough for the commercial here. Let's get back into the program. And we're going to start with basically what we're calling new acquisitions, some new things that have come up this year. The first thing that we're going to start with is an amazing military patch collection donated by Joseph Patterson. And I'm going to, I believe, who was going to take this one?
Lisa.
I'm going to take this one for you.
Okay.
Yes, these were donated this past in 2022 by Joseph's daughters, Brenda and Sharon. Now, Joseph Patterson, he was a World War II Navy veteran. And when he was in World War II, he started collecting patches. And that was his hobby. He did that all the way through until he unfortunately passed in 2009. So these patches, I would say it was probably a labor of love for him. He sewed them on blankets. You can see on the one side, he hand stitched every patch on. He had them arranged them in different categories where all the Navy was together, the Army was together, and so forth like that. He also donated the distinctive unit identifications, the DUI insignia pins. So his daughters donated hundreds of those. So these patches, hand sewn, he displayed them on various occasions around Meadville, PA. That's where he was from. And this past November, we displayed them as a special display for Veterans Day. We had them in our hallways. And I think we have a picture of that too for veterans.
I think it's important to point out, just so the viewers know, we're only looking at one panel here. Yeah. So you might be looking at this thinking, holy cow, look at all these patches. Just hold on a second till we get here. First, we have this photo of Joseph and his patches, though. This was in a newspaper, I think, right, Lisa? This was a newspaper article about him.
Correct. So he made the paper a couple of times, so we're around Meadville where he displayed his patches and his pins.
Right. And then we have this photo here where you start to get the idea, of all of the blankets filled from corner to corner with patches. And I'm actually going to even show a little video here. And you can see as I pan through here, just getting a look at all the different patches. I mean, we had people coming and finding their patches on these. Some people thought there was no way he'd have their patch, and he did. It is a very comprehensive collection, something we'd love to display permanently, but space is an issue for us.
It was amazing, like especially Veterans Day, where we're free, open to the public, and we had so many people there, veterans going up to those blankets and finding their patches and being proud of the patch and showing their family. And we had one gentleman, he was with Mike and I, saying that he was in had something to do with like nuclear studies right during the Cold War, and where's his patch, and it's a very unique patch, and he actually able to find it with this little nuclear explosion patch looking thing and bomb on it. So he was thrilled when he saw his patch on here. So very moving to veterans when they get to see their patch displayed like this. But a lot of work. And I did email his daughters to let them know, and they were totally thrilled that we were honoring their dad and what he used to do, and by having these patches up. So
Yeah, I think you said it best, Lisa. Definitely a labor of love for sure.
Yeah. I just want to add something that patch blankets turn up once in a while. You see one, and a lot of times they were from a soldier who sent patches home, and maybe his wife put together a blanket with all the different patches. This is really unusual. I mean, it's astounding to see how many patches. And Lisa took the picture of the back with the hand stitching, and you can see how much time that must have taken, and how they're all arranged so perfectly and in themes, and it's really quite a collection.
So the next piece we're going to turn to Michael for, and this is going to involve the 14th Pennsylvania Cavalry. And I think he's going to talk a little bit about Mr. Schoonmaker here, and then we'll show you the artifact on the next slide.
The 14th Pennsylvania Cavalry, also known as the 159th Pennsylvania, was a Western Pennsylvania regiment. A lot of companies came out of Pittsburgh in Western Pennsylvania, and its colonel is pictured on the left. That's a man named James Schoonmaker. He came from a well-to-do family, and he was appointed colonel, most likely through connections that he had. You have to remember, in the Civil War, you didn't have to rise through the ranks from a second lieutenant up to a colonel. A lot of times you were appointed, and whether you were a good leader or not would be something that would come from experience. And some of the officers who were not good leaders were washed out. But Schoonmaker was a pretty good leader. He was in his early 20s, and he was a colonel. Now, what's kind of near and dear about the 14th and Schoonmaker is he was on our board of directors, and he was one of the people, the movers and shakers that helped to found Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall. And our very first donation, we have a book, like an inventory book from the very beginning in 1910, where artifacts are numbered as they were donated. And on the right was donation number 1. It came from James Schoonmaker, Colonel Schoonmaker, and it was a painting that he had commissioned of the attack at Winchester, at one of the forts at Winchester, Virginia, in 1864. So he had it commissioned by a very famous artist at the time, Thor de Tholstrup. And because he's paying for this painting, and it's his story, guess where he is? He's on that white horse right in the middle, charging into the battle. Now, he also was a Medal of Honor recipient, and we have pictures of him here with other Medal of Honor recipients. But I just want to lay that story to talk about the 14th for the acquisition that we got. Is that our next slide, Tim? Yes, there it is. This is a canteen. Now, it's not a canteen a soldier carried. It's a canteen, like a commemorative, that was made out of ceramic. So you can see it has a little hole punched in the center of it there, which someday we'll have restored. But the canteen is an image of reconciliation, drinking out of the canteen, life-saving, and it became a symbol. In the Civil War canteen, the federal one, is this shape. It's like two ovoid circles pressed together. And because it's ceramic, there was a company in Ohio that sold these, and on the right-hand panel, you see the Grand Army of the Republic membership medal. In the ceramic, it's slightly embossed, slightly raised. And they sold these and commissioned them. You could have them customized to your service or, as a presentation. This is the nicest one I've ever seen. It has so much going on. We're looking at front and back. And on the left-hand side, there's 2 cavalry guidons. The center image is the insignia of Sheridan's Cavalry Corps. and the dates 1862 to 63, the battles that the 14th was involved in. The mouth of the lip of the canteen has another corps insignia, the division that they fought in, and on the reverse, it has it has a presentation, and it was in 1891, the 9th reunion of the 14th Pennsylvania Cavalry. A man named Huntsman gave it to another former soldier named Greeling, and it's got this great gold lettered inscription on it from Elizabeth, PA. The one fellow, the presenter was from Ohio, and the recipient was from Elizabeth, PA. But it says, "May this token of a messmate friendship be in your old days a source of pleasure of those 3 years of our companionship." So this is a really heartfelt presentation from one comrade to another, and it's just a great example of veterans reconnecting and the artwork of the era. And it came to us, I believe it was mailed to us. Do you remember, Lisa? Was it from California?
Yes, the relative of the gentleman that you just said what his name was there had this piece, and he moved to California, didn't want it sitting in his closet anymore, and wanted to protect it, so he called. And the little side funny note here is that usually when we get these phone calls, I say, send me a picture, but I kind of knew what it was just a little bit, and I made the exception of not running it past Mike, because I knew I wanted to surprise Mike, is to tell you the truth. So I accepted the donation, and it was mailed to us, and then without telling Mike that it was coming. So when it did come in its box, I took it to the curator's office and said, "Here, look what we got," just to say Mike's face when he opened up this box. So, and I wish I had a picture of that face. So, yes, it was in California. It was a relative. The veteran that is listed there was his. I think it's like a great uncle of his.
Yeah, and we get a lot of things, and a lot of stuff gets processed, and it takes time, and we figure out where we can use it, if we can use it. A lot of times it gets stored. This went from my office to a showcase. I mean, it's that wonderful and that exciting to look at. So yeah, that was a quickie. That one went right up.
That one went the next day.
Didn't go to the morgue.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to note that just to follow up on that. We do never promise anything about displaying artifacts. That's pretty standard for all museums. Yeah. You're never going to get a museum to say, yes, we guarantee to display. So that's one thing we're very serious about. We never promise that. We actually try to make it very clear that this may not be on display. So this is very rare for this to happen. But as Lisa and Michael are pointing out, because of the uniqueness and the fact that it fit an exhibit that we already have a theme for, that it just fit right into that theme. It's one of those things that kind of jumped the line and got put into an exhibit a little bit early on. Okay, so we're going to now move on back to Lisa. She's going to tell us about Irene Yagman and some letters that we got from that family.
Yes, a little backstory here before we get into the letters. When I got here like 7 years ago, and I'll make it quick, 7 years ago, I started inventorying everything, and I found a box of women's nurses' uniforms with the Red Cross uniform. There was 4 boxes in a trunk that had Irene Yagman stenciled on the top. So I went and pulled the hard file, and I realized that, when I talked to Mike, when this came in, that these uniforms and trunk were found at a yard sale. And the woman didn't want the pieces to to be taken care of. So she was kind enough to bring all of these items here to Soldiers and Sailors. And that was a while ago, before I got here 7 years ago. So fast forward to 2000, we get a phone call. Mike takes a phone call saying, my aunt just passed away, and she was a nurse in World War II. and we have some of her things, and we'd like to go ahead and donate it to Soldiers and Sailors. Here, they make an appointment, they come in, and here it's her aunt was Irene Yagman. And I think Mike and I probably could have fallen over. So when she said her name, so when I explained to her name was Patty Clifford. So Patty Clifford was Irene's niece. So Patty, I explained that we have all of our uniforms. Immediately, I went up here to the morgues. I brought all 4 boxes down, and we started putting these pieces together. And Patty and her husband and family were totally thrilled. They were even wondering what happened to Aunt Irene's uniforms. So that being said, she had some letters that Charles Sadlow wrote to Irene. Now, Irene was, both of them served in World War II. Irene was with the 59th EVAC Hospital, and Charles was with the 517th Parachute Infantry Regiment. So they started a relationship when they were both serving overseas together, and Patty had about 40 letters. Well, this was 2020 when Patty was here, and Patty just wouldn't give up those letters. I begged and pleaded, and she's like, I really want to go ahead and take them home. Well, this past summer, I got a phone call, and Patty's like, I'm really, ready to give you Irene and Charles's letters. So I think we have them on the next slide. There was 40 letters that Charles wrote to Irene, and Irene must have kept these letters the whole entire time. So what I'm going to do is these letters, they dated from June 5th, 1944, day before D-Day, to October 3rd, 1944. And I'm going to read just a few lines from 4 different letters. And the reason I picked these as special because Irene was a nurse, and I think when Mike and I, and Tim could attest to this, when we get letters, I mean, they're first person accounts. We love the letters, but there's a difference when somebody, a soldier, is writing home to mom. He's going to make sure mom knows that he's okay and everything's wonderful, and he's not going to go ahead and he'll say something to dad or his brother that's something a little different. He's a little bit more honest of what he's going through. So it's rare that we do see a man being so honest with Irene. And I believe, and it's just my hunch, Irene was a combat nurse. So he knew she sees the dirt too, and she is right there with him. So he's very honest with her. So, and I'm going to just put a little warning out, it might be a little graphic for some of our viewers, but I really wanted to read some of these letters. The first letter is just a couple lines from the first letter is dated June 25th, 1944. So 19 days after D-Day. And he's calling her, Dearest Irene, I'm still digging my foxhole deep, and I have been glad of it a few times. Managed to kill 4 Jerrys the other day and was surprised at the lack of emotion that goes into killing. I keep bouncing around from subject to subject, but I'm rather nervous. That seems to be rather common ailment here. I trust you know what I mean. About you dating other apples, hell, kid, it's your life and no hearts and flowers. You know me better than that. Should I expect you to sit in and pine? Hell no. Have a good time. Maybe I seem a little worried, but things have been rather rough. We'll write more later today, moving out. You see what I mean? It's just like this, is raw emotion that he's dealing with 19 days into after D-Day. The next letter, like I said, I'm it might be a little graphic, but just a little warning for our younger viewers. 27th of June, just a couple of days later, 44th. Don't know what a little milk of human kindness I may have had. It's gone now, and I find it hard to be the old cheery boy I used to be. But what the hell? Am I trying to psychoanalyze myself or what? This ain't the most happy letter you'll receive. Some random thoughts, vivid impressions. The first dead Jerry shot in the back as he was trying to run. The first man I killed, through the jaw and brain at 30 yards. A kid, but well deserving to die. The bastard. Our kids have caught some kind of fever. They go hunting Jerry at night and really build up a score. It seems that Jerry don't like night fighting. Our boys do. We'll sign off now, and as soon as I get to a rest area, we'll write a long letter. This ain't quite the place for a correspondence. Again, this emotion that when you read, we get a lot of letters. We have hundreds of letters, and it's very rare to have that raw emotion that is put down on paper, especially to a loved one. But I think Irene, being a nurse and a combat nurse in the thick of things, he felt, that he was comfortable enough to say these things to her. One more letter, just a couple of lines. I picked this one. It's October 3rd, 1944. Beg of you to send me at least one bottle of bait. Now, reading other letters, I found out that bait was alcohol. So at least one bottle of bait to help my morale. I tried to get to see you, but it's too far. I tried, but impossible. I am resting now, was afraid for a while. I was going off my nut. The gang we ran across here won't bother you. They're all casualties, only the kind you put in mattress covers. Well, darling, have not much to say, except it's really been rough at times, and at times wasn't sure whether or not the old hole was deep enough. Well, darling, again, good night, sweet dreams. Hope we meet again soon. All my love, Charles. Now, this was October 4th, 1944. Charles died on the 8th. So he was killed on the 8th, 5 days later after this letter was written. Again, Mike and Tim can attest to this. Is the letters that we receive. It's rare that you have this much honesty in a letter and this much emotion in a letter. There was one more letter that Irene must have wrote Charles, commanding officer. And this one was dated the next month, a month later, November 24th, 1944, and it says France. And he must have wrote her back after getting a letter from Irene. And it says, Dear Irene, received your letter of November 18th today, and I recognized your name at once. So, of course, I knew what you were going to ask. I heard Sato speak of you so often. I know you're wondering whether Sato suffered on the way out. No, I believe he did not. One of our docs got there in an aid jeep and checked him, and he was in the happy hunting ground. A piece of shell casing had hit him in the middle of the back and got right to his heart, I guess. The whole thing took about 4 to 5 seconds. He never knew whether he was hit or not. Sadlow and I always used to talk about the time when we would cash it in. That's all I can tell you, Irene. I'm sorry I can't seem to put down in writing the way I really feel, but maybe someday we can get together and I can explain it later. Sincerely, Dawn. So these are just 4 of the 40 letters that Charles wrote Irene. I've been studying them greatly since we received them. I did find, I think that there was a picture of Charles' grave that is in New Jersey. Maybe I'll reach out, to see if I can find the family members. But when it goes back to Irene, I just wanted to let you know that her uniforms are here on display. There they are. That is her Red Cross uniform there, hanging on the right, the lighter one of them. And she was with the Red Cross first, and then went over to the nurse with the wax. And there's her shoes, and there's a beautiful picture of Irene in there also. So if you wanted to see Irene's uniforms, we do have them on display.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The brutal honesty coming out of those letters is something we just don't see very often, and it's amazing to hear those words. Okay, next we're going to go back to Michael, and he's going to tell us a little bit about a flag that we got donated this past year.
Flags are wonderful objects. You know, they're not only patriotic and just you know, they evoke emotion from us, but they also are a chronicle. You know, we know that the number of stars indicates how many states were officially in the Union at the time the flag was made. So that's one of the easiest ways to document a flag. So a family had this flag for a long time, and I don't want to move the picture yet, Tim, but there's a picture of one of the younger members holding the flag in the 1940s. But the flag was kept by this family, and it was accompanied with a note. Well, first of all, I want you to see that it was originally a 32-star flag, which would date from 1858, and then in 1860, two stars were added, and you can see the man on the right. He's actually one of our docents, Russ Reisig, is the corner that he's holding. You can see two added stars. How are they added? Because they're out of sequence, out of the rhythm of the other stars. The others are in a perfect line, and these two were kind of dropped in between. So the flag was made in 1858, and in 1860, for the Civil War, the two stars were added. Now, go to the next slide. So the note that accompanies this flag says, "This flag was made by Mr. Whitford when signal quartermaster of the Susquehanna, flagship of Commodore Perry in the Japan expedition, made from pieces left from the first American flag raised in Japan." And then it's signed by a man named H. McGeegan. The family had always believed that this flag was the flag that flew on Perry's flagship in the expedition to Japan, but that happened before 1858. And we know where that actual flag is, the one that flew on Perry's flagship, and you can see it there in the photo on the right in the background. That is on the deck of the Missouri when the surrender was signed, ending World War II with Japan. And what happened was the Navy knew they had this flag. It was the first flag to fly in Japan in the early 1850s, and they made a hustle to get it there, frame it, and have it in the background of this ceremony at the surrender in 1945. So we know that is the Perry flag. So what is this flag? Well, if we read the note very carefully, and here you can see also on the left-hand side is a picture. This is actually the donor's brother, taken in the late 1940s, holding the flag, and you can see the added stars, so it's absolutely the same flag. And it makes a reference to it being Perry's flagship flag. And they even say made of burlap. Well, it's made of a coarse wool bunting, which is a little bit scratchy. It's not burlap, but it's a wool bunting, which is why the flag survived. If it was made of silk, it would have fallen apart, but wool bunting seems to be pretty stable, and a lot of flags from that era made from that material still exist. But anyhow, getting back to the story and reading the note more carefully, it says it was made from pieces left of the first flag raised in Japan. So obviously, this Mr. Whitford, who was a signal quartermaster, had access to quartermaster stores and objects around that were no longer being used, and he may have taken one of the flags that was in the Perry expedition. There were several ships, and used pieces to construct this flag, this 34-star flag. I mean, that being said, it's still a very rare and historic object, and flag collectors back in the I don't actually know when it was standardized to put the stars in rows and columns like we have it now. But before that happened, and a lot of Civil War flags are like this, the stars are all over the place. They're in circles. They radiate out. There's a central star. There are many different patterns, and some of that is looked at as a kind of folk art, as a interpretive art. And certainly this flag was made entirely by hand, and the addition of those two stars kind of throw the balance of the canton out, making it more interpretive than regulation. So it's a big flag. We hope to display it eventually with our Navy displays as we renovate displays. We're very happy to have it. The family was very generous to bring it to us, and it's now a part of our collection.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Another wonderful artifact that just find its way here. It's amazing. One of the things I always tell people is working here is so interesting because you just never know what's going to walk through that door or get mailed to us. Or sometimes people think they have one thing and it turns out they have something else. So it's always very interesting. Our next piece is a diary that Lisa's going to tell us about. Let me switch the slide here. Lisa, you want to tell us about this diary?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, I mean, we're very selective of what we bring in to soldiers and sailors for our permanent collection, and we always ask, when somebody calls or emails us, do we have the backstory of that piece? And this certainly does. So this was a notebook that belonged to John Aberwitz, I believe his last name is, and he's from McKees Rocks. He was a technical sergeant in the 59th Coastal Artillery, and he was taken prisoner of war from the Battle of Corregidor on May 8th, 1942. And he kept this notebook when he was a prisoner of war. Now, and we have a couple of diaries from POWs, but this is our first in our collection from somebody that was in a Japanese prison camp. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight it because it's extremely cool of what he wrote. He wrote down the names of the prisoners that were with him, and then on the opposite page, on the underside, is Italian recipes, which I'm not sure if he was writing those during when he was a prisoner of war, but the recipes on one side and who he was in the prison camps with him on the other side. So on the other side of the page here, we did a little bit of research. Now I picked this one to highlight our intern program. So when I get something like this, we want to go ahead and do some research. And this is a great piece for an intern to start learning how to research, start learning how to use different sites and what information we can find out of this notebook. Because when you first look at it, all you see are names and addresses. But when you start researching each name and trying to find it, we dig deeper into the individual. So, like I said, this John he survived the Bataan Death March, and he spent 42 months in a couple of different Japanese prison camps, and he was liberated in September of 1945. So in this journal, and I had the intern help me, my last intern, Morgan, she was very helpful in this one. She made an Excel spreadsheet, and she realized that what he was recording in this book are the names of the gentleman that he was serving with in the POW camp, their service numbers, their home addresses, the conditions and any injuries that they had, along with any other additional information as if they died in the camps. He noted the date that they passed away, or if they passed away on a transport ship. he also jotted down, he must have done a little bit of research after he was liberated, maybe, when he got home afterwards, because he started jotting down what medals they received. So there's quite a bit of information. So the highlights of what the intern found is there was 125 names in this book, and 12 of them are from Pennsylvania. So she did find that. 25 died in the hands of the Japanese, either during in camp or when they were transporting them to different camps. And there was a couple different highlights that she pointed out to me that is just fascinating. There is a gentleman of name of Ernest Kolbos. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was one of the 11 men who survived the Palawan massacre. So he passed away in 2018. So he was only 11 men survived that slaughter, if you know anything about that. And he was one of them. He found out that there were 4 missing in action and 7 were killed in the response of the U.S. torpedo syndicate of the Arisen Maroon on October 24th, 1944. So these were people that were serving with him in this POW camp, were prisoners with him, and they were being transported on that particular ship. That ship was torpedoed by a U.S. torpedo, and no POWs were killed during the torpedo act. But what happened is the Japanese went over and picked up their soldiers and their sailors and left the POWs actually to die. So there was also a gentleman listed in the book that he did pass away in the prison camp. He was from Connellsville. His name is, he was a Captain Harry Shinek. He is listed in this book. He was from Connellsville, PA. He died in this prison camp with John on February 21st, 1945. And he was a United States Military Academy, came out of the Academy West Point, and he was a Silver Star recipient. So these are the things that, when we do dive into something, that we find as much information as possible and we use at a later date. So, some of these things that Mike was saying and Tim was saying are not on display. They're put in our storage areas, which are right here. I get that a question a lot. Where are your storage facilities? Well, they're right here in this building. And we use them for other things. So we are in the middle of all these universities. We get a lot of scholars calling us, a lot of grad students. If somebody calls and says, do we have anything about POWs? We have John's diary, and we have all the information about what John's diary actually consists of. And that's a great, way to highlight what our interns do. And we usually have 1, sometimes 2 interns a semester from local colleges.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And shout out to Morgan Meir, who was the intern that worked on this particular project. But we are very thankful and grateful to all of our interns. If you are interested in our internship program, I'm the coordinator of the program, and you can reach out to me to get more information. But like Lisa said, it is usually about 1 position per semester, maybe sometimes 2, depending on our workload. And it's if you know somebody interested in learning about museums, it's a great way to learn about how a small museum operates and what happens here. So another good aspect of what we do around here. With that, we're going to move on to Michael again for Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Moore and some of the documents from his collection that we received.
Sure. This story is a little like Lisa's Yagman story, where there was an initial, Irene Yagman, there was an initial donation made by a family, and then over a period of years, they decided to give us more objects. So this particular group of objects and artifacts is centered around the man on the left. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Moore. He was from Brunswick, New Jersey. He's not a Pennsylvanian. The family lives in Pennsylvania, and that's where it descended to. Moore had been a an officer in the New Jersey militia when the Civil War popped up. He was in one of the early New Jersey regiments at Bull Run, 3rd New Jersey. He was then promoted to be lieutenant colonel of the 11th New Jersey and served in that regiment until the Battle of Chancellorsville. He was a little bit older. I don't remember his exact age, but older than your 18, 19-year-old. He may have been in his 40s or late 40s at the time. He was the fighting was very hard. The weather was hot. It was Virginia. A shell exploded. He fell from his horse, got knocked out, but he was affected by the sunstroke. Essentially, he just could not finish. He was removed from the battlefield. His family actually thought he was dead. They didn't hear from him for a few days, and then he pops up again, and he doesn't go home. He is promoted to be the lieutenant colonel of what was called the Veteran Reserve Corps, 16th Regiment Veteran Reserve Corps. Now, what was the Veteran Reserve Corps? It was a amalgamation of soldiers who had been serving and were injured and didn't want to end their service. They wanted to continue, but they could still act as guards, like at bridges or railroads. They were used to lighten the load, let's say, from the regular army in the rear, take care of some of that kind of stuff. So he becomes lieutenant colonel of the 16th Volunteer, Veteran Reserve Corps, and he is made commandant at Elmira Prison in New York, where Confederate prisoners are being kept. And after that, after the prisoners were released in 1865, he goes on to be part of he's assigned to North Carolina in charge of one of the districts of the Freedmen's Bureau. And that was the military occupation of what had been the South of the Confederate States. Federal troops were there to ensure that freedmen, former slaves, were being protected and getting property that they deserved. And he was in charge of a pretty big district of that in North Carolina until 1869. So we did get some of his pieces earlier. And this past year, the family decided to give us these 2 beautiful wooden boxes. They're walnut dovetailed boxes, document boxes, and they were stuffed to the brim with letters, bulging. And Moore was a compulsive writer and an organizer. He kept everything in little bundles. Most of it was organized by years or military papers, pension papers, Elmira prison papers. And it took me a while to really dig in and unbundle these papers to kind of sort it out. There's a lot of Civil War correspondence. Now, he's writing home to his wife, and he had several children. Primarily, he's writing home to a wife and a daughter and a son. And he must have written, like in some months, I now have them organized by months. Some months there are 10 to 12 letters, and some months there are 30 letters. And there are 3-4 pages each. And his handwriting is very difficult to read. He's writing very fast, and he's writing in pen, like an ink pen that you dip. And I haven't had time to really read a lot. I'm hoping there's really good content. I mean, if a guy's writing every day, you hope that he would talk about what's happening. And I will dive into that a little bit later, but I did find in sorting them a few treasures. And I think there's a picture of the next picture. How did that get in there? Oh, I know. Okay, I know. I was thinking about Schoonmaker's in that picture. So I thought, well, that was...
Yeah, we were linking a few things together here, but
we are. It's working. I just was surprised for a second. So one of the papers I found is on the right, and it is a very brief note written from Washington in 1863. And it's talking about the commander of a regiment being killed at Chancellorsville, and the duties fell upon Lieutenant Colonel Moore. So it's kind of an endorsement of his gallantry and his good conduct. And it's signed on the bottom by Dan Sickles, Major General of the Third Corps. Sickles is a major figure. He was already wounded. He was wounded at Gettysburg on July 2nd and lost a leg. And this letter is written in October. So Moore must have written him and asked for an endorsement. And this is the endorsement. But why we have the picture in the center is Sickles was a guest of honor here at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in the opening on October 11th, 1910. And he's seated in the middle, kind of the back row, underneath the painting. His head is kind of the one that's a little bit lower in the back row. That's Dan Sickles, and he was also on stage at the opening ceremonies. And you kind of never really know what you're going to find unless you dig through, letter by letter. And just yesterday, I was looking through the Elmira prison stuff, and there are a lot of letters written from Southern families asking whether their loved one is in that prison because they heard he might be, and if he is, could Lieutenant Colonel Moore write back and let them know how he is, and if he's healthy. And they're searching. There's no way to search. There's no internet. There's no Instagram. There's no Facebook. And this is how they did it. They wrote letters, and assuming, because Moore saved all these, I am assuming that he wrote replies to them. And there are a few letters even written by former prisoners shortly after the war, thanking Moore for the good treatment. Even though times were hard, and the federal soldiers didn't always have enough food, even in the prison camps in the North. But one prisoner said they were well fed. He had blankets. They had coal in their barracks that they could have a fire. So he was thanking him for those things in literally his survival. So we also have, I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, this is the heading of one of the letters that was where Moore served in North Carolina. And you can see it says, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, Headquarters, Eastern District of North Carolina. So this was the Bureau. O.O. Howard, former general in the U.S. Army, he was still a general at that time, and the man that Howard University is named after, was very active in seeing that freed slaves were finding their place, being protected, in trying to get them, trying to turn around their former the hardships they had suffered, and have them be on their approach to full citizenship. So I always thought it was interesting that it was the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Now, those abandoned lands were former plantations, and the government was giving a lot of that land to people who had formerly been enslaved. On the bottom, we didn't get this year, but it came with the initial donation. The African American citizens of New Bern, North Carolina, upon the end of Lieutenant Colonel Moore's service in 1869, were so enamored and impressed with him and grateful that they gave him this silver tea set, and it's engraved on the large picture to Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Moore, with esteem from the colored citizens of New Bern, North Carolina, 1869. And there's within the papers that we just got, there were a number, the testimonial that was read when he received the tea set from these citizens, and it just really, the correspondence really helped to lock everything together, and let us see a piece of time in post-war history that we don't often get a chance to flesh out. And there's a lot of interest in that now. So, I think in the near future, we'll be looking deeper into these letters to see what the content is.
Yeah, that's going to be a long-term project, I get the feeling of, but it's
Long-term.
wonderful to connect these dots and, of course, especially kind of the second story we've had here where it's tiered donations, families giving us things over time, which is, we're so grateful to all our donors and all those that are willing to give up of their family's history. We are coming up against some time here, but we had, I think, just a couple real quick hitters, just some kind of wow items that knocked us back a little bit. The first was this here from Ernest Husak. When you want to tell just quickly about what this is?
That's Husak was a member of the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment. It originally was part of the 82nd, became part of the 17th Airborne. That's his dog tag on the left. It's supposed to be plated with a silver metal. It's completely worn off. The edges are completely rounded. And it's stamped with the number 507, which is really unusual. I don't know if he'd want to be captured and have that, stamped on his dog tag because the Parachute Infantry Regiment, the airborne guys were pretty tough, and they could give it and take it. But it's attached to a bracelet that he had made, and you can see the blue bar in the background is his combat infantry badge. It's kind of been formed into a bracelet, and on the front of that is applied his parachute jump wings with a combat star. And this is just a spectacular object from a very famous regiment, something that we're very proud to have.
And then the other real quick one we had here was the Devil Dogs, United States Marine Corps.
Yeah, these are just things that, real quickly, because I know we're running out of time here, is stopped us in our tracks. We get a lot of donations. I think we got like 82 donations in 2022. And these two pieces that were just quick hits here that we just like, these are really, really, wow pieces. World War I felt, held a pillow. It can be a pillowcase of some sort, but, to get this World War I intact in pristine condition, it just stopped us in our tracks, and we were like, this is really, really cool.
Yeah, I think it's important maybe to take a second to mention that, we had 82 donations, but we are selective. There was a time when, you could come in here and almost anything was being accepted. But now we usually have discussions, unless Lisa wants to pull a fast one on Mike, but we usually discuss everything and give it some thought and, make sure that it fits with our mission, of course, and, fits in a story that we'd like to tell, that the item actually has a story to it and isn't just a uniform with no name, no patches or anything like that. These are the kind of things that we're looking for when it comes to donations. And as we've kind of said, we don't guarantee display, but there are other uses. And Lisa touched on, people doing research. Of course, I use things in the education department. And sometimes we take things on the road. We set up little exhibits. This is up at the VA hospital up in Oakland. These are two of the, that's like a little frame display window that they've granted us to share stuff that we have so that, gets our name out there. And Lisa, just real quick, want to tell us, what these two were about?
Yeah, this one's, we try to go up at least once a quarter, but if it's a really cool piece, we keep it in there longer. We do different, we recognize different events or highlights in the military career. This was in June, was the PTS Awareness Month. And working with the VA, they have a new 988 number to go ahead and call if you PTSD and need some help. So we were going to go be supportive of that and put a jacket in there of a gentleman that is well known here at Soldiers and Sailors, that we knew he was dealing with some PTSD. So we are honoring him and making sure that that new number is out. The other side is a prize of Mike's, is we have our statue that we unveiled, America's Defenders statue. And Mike, you probably say a little bit about this, but we're promoting the Defenders statue on the other display. So we try to go up there at least 4 times a year to promote soldiers and sailors, but also give back a little bit to the veterans up there that go past. And then we also take our show on the road. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, take that opportunity to point out that we did a show about the statue. So just a real quick point out that we do have an archive on our YouTube and Facebook page where you can watch past Spotlight Ons. And one of our ones this past year was all about the statue. So if you're interested or you just heard about this maybe for the first time, America's Defenders, what's that all about? That sounds neat. Just look in our archives and you can learn all about the statue, what it represents, how it was made, about the artist, of course, which was Michael. So that information, those videos are still always out there for you to watch. And then I think you were going to go on to talk about, some of the other places like Penn's Veteran Appreciation Night.
Yep, we've done that. I think this is our 4th or 5th time in a row that we go down to their Veterans Appreciation Night, and we have a display down there of our items. Again, not all things can be on display, but we like to take our show on the road. That's one. And then the World of Life Church, we're having on Veterans Day, was having a celebration. They had over 600. Our president and CEO, John McCabe, he actually spoke there. So we took a few more pieces out there and we had a display out there honoring veterans from, we started at World War I or Civil War, I'm sorry, for this one. And then we went all the way up to our present day veterans. And then next week I will be at World of Wheels show. So I'll have a big display down there. You can come and see me, and I'll have every piece from World War I to our post 9/11 veterans, our current veterans. So I'll have some of our pieces down there next week.
Yeah, you'll be down there next Sunday, right? I believe it's the Sunday's
Yes.
the day that you'll be down there. Yep.
I'll be down there
Yeah,
Sunday.
and it's I think it's pretty clear we have a lot to keep us busy down here, and there's always more to be done. And it's just a wonderful place to work and wonderful people to work with. So I want to thank Lisa and Michael for joining us tonight and talking about this last year. I'd also like to quickly say thank you to Paul and Andrew and Terry. I see some comments from you guys. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and thank you for the comments. Terry even pointed out that Terry Johnson that as a signalman, it seems like he might have had responsibility for the flag bag. So he was speaking back to that flag and how possibly he came upon some of those scraps for the flag that we had donated. So that was a nice comment there. Thank you, Terry. As always, we have a lot coming up here, always stuff going on. You can come and visit the museum during our regular hours, or you can schedule a guided tour by appointment. I do always recommend visiting our website before you come, just to make sure that there isn't a closure for some reason, special event or something like that. So really, to get all this information and learn more about us, soldiersandsailorshall.org is your answer. You can see that on there at the bottom. Specifically, we also have coming up our next Tabletop Gamers session. Will be at the end of the month here, Saturday, January 28th. This is a growing program. We get more and more people interested each month, and we hope that there's more gamers out there that will be joining us for military gaming. And then next month, not only will we have our Spotlight On, which I'll talk about in a minute, but we'll also have our John L. Ford Sr. African American Heritage Celebration on February 23rd. This is an annual event that's been going on for many, many years here at Soldiers and Sailors. It was actually started by John L. Ford in the beginning. He has since passed away, so we have named it after him. And this year, we just started finalizing the plans. Michael and I just had a meeting with some of our panelists yesterday, and we'll be focusing on African Americans in World War I, a story that often doesn't get told. And we'll learn a little bit about some local context, but also just in general, the experience of the African-American soldiers in World War I. So that'll be a virtual program, of course, free to the public to join us just like you did this evening on Facebook and YouTube. And that'll be on February 23rd. And then finally, that brings me to our next Spotlight On, which will be February 9th. 2023 at 7:00. And this will focus on an exhibit we have here called Thinking of You. And this is really an exhibit that looks at, I like to think of it as the other side of a soldier's life. I know a lot of times when I get kids that come in for tours and things, their first instinct is soldiers fight all the time. They're always fighting. Well, that's certainly not the case, as we all know. And certainly anybody who served will tell you that boredom sometimes can be one of the bigger challenges that you face in between these terrible, fearful situations. So Thinking of You is kind of that other side of a soldier's life, the communications with loved ones, the collecting things, making artwork, all different avenues is kind of this, like I keep saying, the other side of a soldier's life that we'll be highlighting coming up in February. And some of it will be a little bit tied to Valentine's Day, of course, when you think of Thinking of You, Valentine's Day comes in. So that's kind of what got us thinking about highlighting that specific exhibit and some of the artifacts in there for next month on February 9th. So with that, I want to say one more time, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to everybody who tuned in this evening. We look forward to seeing you next month, and I hope everybody has a good night and take care.
Good night. Thank you.